Max Verstappen has confirmed that he is staying at Red Bull for 2026, with this circus between him, Toto Wolff, George Russell, Mercedes and Red Bull finally coming to an end, at least for this season, before I'm sure it restarts all over again next year for 2027. However, not only did Max confirm it in the lead up to Hungary, but Helmut Marko also confirmed it after the Belgian Grand Prix, when Max did not trigger his exit clause, as he is still in the top 3 of the World Drivers' Championship. Now, in general, I think this is a good thing for Max Verstappen, and of course it is a good thing for Red Bull. There is so much change, which I'm going to get into, but for the most part, that stability of still having the best driver on the grid, kind of holding the team together, is absolutely a lifeline for Red Bull as they go into a brand new era with a brand new power unit and also a brand new management. This in itself is going to take a huge amount of pressure off Laurent Mekies' shoulders, because his number one priority had to be to retain Max for 2026, because had Max left for Mercedes, even though George Russell would be available and so he would perhaps be the obvious candidate, other than that, every single top driver is already locked into their contracts, while at least for the driver market of 2027, there is a lot of seats open and a lot more drivers available, and although Red Bull are not going to find someone better most likely than Max Verstappen, especially given how the entire team is just being built around him in terms of the environment and the car, at least in 2027, if Max does decide to leave, there will be other options of race winning and potentially even championship caliber drivers who, yes, will probably not be as good as Max Verstappen, but you still need a championship caliber driver to lead this top team in the post-Verstappen era. For Max, I just do not think that it made that much sense to jump from Red Bull to Mercedes, at least for the moment, because for one, Red Bull, at least in the hands of Max Verstappen, is still a better car right now than the Mercedes. That is something that I think gets often overlooked, because yes, Red Bull are struggling with that second seat, yes, there is a lot of unknown about how good that car really is, especially once Max leaves the team, but the fact is that once again, right now, in the hands of Max Verstappen, the Red Bull is the second best car on the grid, and that is not just something that you can kind of dismiss very easily. On top of that, Max has the massive luxury that Toto Wolff basically is going to wait for him even if Mercedes become the dominant force in 2026, in which case both of their drivers are going to want to lock into contracts, because he wants Max Verstappen more than anything else. Max Verstappen has the luxury of both time and also opportunity. He can wait it out into 2026, he can have the loyalty and give Red Bull a chance in their brand new era with a Red Bull Ford powertrain to see how good it's going to be in 2026 and the potential it has going forward. However, if Mercedes do become the dominant force or even just outright overtake Red Bull with their powertrain alone, then Max still has that luxury of still being able to go to Toto and jump ship for 2027. Something else that I think is also very interesting to consider is what role did Red Bull choosing to fire Christian Horner have to play in Max confirming his future just a couple of races later. Red Bull clearly are trying to stabilize the team, and even though I don't think Max necessarily hated Christian Horner or was lobbying inside of Red Bull to get him out of the team, I also don't think that what his dad said last year about Horner if he stays, that he would rip the team apart, and Horner eventually leaving a year later, I don't think those two things are necessarily not connected. I think Max, even though he wasn't lobbying to get Horner out, even though he has a lot of respect for Christian Horner, I'm not sure he had that much loyalty towards him. If we go back to last year, when Horner was going through his investigation, Max kind of towed the company line, really not saying anything and not really supporting him that much. However, the moment that there was even a mention of the fact that potentially Helmut Marko might also be kicked out of Red Bull, Max immediately put his foot down and basically said that if he leaves, then I leave as well. That is the sort of support that Horner never received from Max Verstappen, and it really does show you where his loyalties lie. With Horner now gone, I don't think that Max is necessarily shedding that many tears. I think he likes the fact that there is now a bit more stability with Laurent Mekies, with someone who doesn't have as much power as Christian Horner had inside of Red Bull. And with that power vacuum now with Horner gone, it is clear to me that the Team Verstappen with the Helmut Marko, Jos Verstappen and Max Verstappen connection, they have got even more power now inside of Red Bull. Hopefully with this stability, it just settles the team, because I think it's easy to forget that Red Bull as an organization in terms of the race team is still one of the sharpest operations we have ever seen in terms of strategy, in terms of pit stops, in terms of car design, and then drivers as well. Yes, there has been a massive brain drain from the organization, and some of the best minds in Formula 1 have exited Red Bull and have actually gone on to have a lot of success, like for example, Rob Marshall at McLaren. But it is going to be interesting to see in the post-Horner and the post-Newey era how this team actually functions without those major key players that were so integral to starting the team. The one thing that is for certain is that there is a lot of pressure on Pierre Vacher, the technical director for 2026, because Horner was a big advocate of Vacher, and if the car is not competitive both on the aero and also the power unit side, I honestly think that Pierre Vacher probably will not be technical director by the end of 2026. Of course, the other side of that coin is George Russell at Mercedes, who finally will have a little bit more stability for the next year, although I do want to emphasize only for a year. This entire circus is going to start all over again in exactly 12 months' time, and probably not even that, but at least George I do think will get a brand new contract, and as I predicted at the beginning of 2025, I think all Toto is going to give him is a 1+1 year deal, a confirmed seat for 26 of course, but then an option on the team side for 27 if Max Verstappen does come calling. I think that that's going to be announced after the summer break in the kind of Monza kind of time. That's usually when Mercedes like to confirm contracts, and if anyone deserves a contract, it is George Russell. I do think in a way that if Max Verstappen becomes available, you kind of have to take the best driver in Formula 1, but at the same time, it was such a horrible situation for George Russell because he has done everything that has been asked of him by Mercedes through all of their bad years, especially in the post-2021 era, and he is still not being given a car even close to being capable of challenging for a championship. This entire situation is just really bizarre because we're talking about two very, very high caliber drivers, and as strange it is to say to miss out on the best driver in Formula 1, it does feel like kind of justice for Russell given how well he's driving himself. The thing that I think is going to be very interesting next year is that, can he really stay at Mercedes? Russell's quotes have been very interesting of late, saying that he is not aligned with Mercedes and that they put him at risk during this current kind of negotiation period, and I think that really does seem like there is a potential breakdown in the relationship between Russell and Toto Wolff. I definitely think that there has been a loss of trust between those two, and so it does bring up options for a potential split in 2027, but at least then, compared to now, there is going to be a lot better options for George, with the likes of Aston Martin, for example. I think that could be a really good choice for George Russell. I just think the Russell-Aston Martin brand would fit absolutely perfectly. But then of course there will also be, I'm sure, a seat at Red Bull if Max does decide to leave. Ferrari technically will also have a seat because Lewis has an option on the third year. Williams also will have a seat alongside Alexander Albon, at least for the moment, and Audi is potentially an outsider as well for the likes of George Russell. This is another reason that I think it's just a better outcome for both of these two drivers to stay exactly where they are for 2026, and then Max can decide his future for 2027, because had George Russell lost his seat in the 2026 driver market where there really is only Red Bull to go to, and that, especially had Horner been there, would have been an absolutely bizarre collaboration of Helmut Marko, George Russell and Christian Horner at Red Bull. I mean, talk about a clash of cultures right there. That would have just been a really strange dynamic. So I think even if George loses his seat next year, there is just a much more buoyant driver market for 2027 and much better options for him to potentially go to, and it just seems like a more fair and more loyal outcome for both Max Verstappen and Red Bull, and also for George at Mercedes, even if it does feel that that George and Toto partnership and relationship has kind of lost a lot of its trust. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to subscribe. That would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.